Welcome to the Smooth Jazz Podcast.
Oh, let's see what you did there. I thought you were going to introduce everybody.
No,
No?
not at
You
all.
sure?
It's the ReThink podcast. They already know us or they wouldn't be here.
Well, I'm surprised they're here anyway. Well, hey, welcome. We're glad you're here. I don't know, where are we?
Corinth.
That's right.
I'm going to skip
Actually, we're not in Corinth.
We're in Isthmia.
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 It's right by Corinth because we.
Sounds like you got to lift a little bit.
I think you have to with that.
Yeah,
don't you?
with that one you do.
Isthmia.
Isthmus?
Isthmus.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Isthmus?
Isn't that like a landmass surrounded by three
Yeah.
sides?
Well, 4 kilometers wide right here.
Yeah.
Aegean and Adriatic.
yeah.
And so, which one is
Two.
this?
Wait, is it 2 sides or 3 sides?
I believe
I
it's
think this is the Aegean.
It's the Aegean.
Or, no.
We're going to need
No.
our
Mediterranean.
viewers to let us know whether
A peninsula
and
is
isthmus.
surrounded on all 3 sides.
Right.
An isthmus is 2
No,
sides.
that's the.
It's a land.
Viewership is already fallen off.
It's
We
the
don't even know where
Aegean
we
Sea.
are.
But just 4 kilometers away is the Adriatic. Yeah.
Well, we sat down to record this podcast, and we realized there's music going on in the background. We're at our hotel. We tried to give the audience a view of the sea. It was not going to happen because of the wind, and so we had to move over here.
So, did anyone else notice we're sitting on a balcony and nobody else is here?
Mm-hmm.
Just saying.
Well, it's
early.
6:43
Everybody's
Yeah.
eating dinner.
in Greece, so they're getting ready to eat.
Yeah, they-
Not yet. Last night we were walking down the street, and the guy tries to woo us into his restaurant. It was 7:05.
Yep.
And I said, "Well, we've already eaten." He said, "At 7? If you've eaten at 7?"
What time do
But
they
he was
normally,
trying to get us to go into his restaurant at 7. But yeah, anyway,
What time do they normally eat? Are
I think they just start to come out right now.
7:30, 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
It looks like.
Well, it's smoking hot here.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. A lot of outdoor dining.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So it makes sense that
That's
you go
true.
eat
when the sun goes down?
when it's starting to go down.
yeah.
What time do you guys eat at your house?
5:30.
Well, in the summer we
Yeah,
do
about
eat
there.
later.
Do you?
Yeah.
In the winter we'll eat at 5:30, but in the summer it might be 7.
Yeah, that's true.
7:30.
So
I
my wife.
work hard when I get home.
Well, yeah. My wife has a lunch that's like at 10:40, which means she's hungry by like 4:30. So during the school year, I have to place my lunches earlier, so I'm ready to eat by 4:30. So, which
don't-
means
I don't
snack
feel
time
like-
comes around
I
about
was
8.
just saying.
I
I
was
was
just
gonna
say
ask
you don't really have a problem with that though.
No, I don't know. No, it's not an issue.
I'll eat early.
Yeah.
Well, hey,
What's our theme?
Yeah, so we went to Delphi today. Let's talk about Delphi.
It's extensive.
That's huge.
This seems
Yeah.
real intense. Do you
The
have
archaeological ruins there were incredible.
Yeah.
That was worth going to see.
So it is believed that Apollo let 2 eagles go, one to his left, one to his right, and they flew to the center of the earth. He then, according to Greek mythology, this is all Greek mythology, he got on a dolphin and he rode to where the eagles landed. And
Which is weird because it was several miles from the water.
Yeah, he would have had to walk.
He had to get out on the
Up the hill.
beach, kind of like Jonah.
Yeah.
And he walks up there.
so that is.
when they landed,
yeah.
they made that famous pronouncement, the eagles have landed.
Oh,
Oh,
my
yeah.
goodness.
So Zeus knew exactly
had-
when to go.
You're
We had-
full of them.
we had the
That's here we go. It's a
monk
dad
monk fruit last week,
Yeah.
and the eagle has
Mhm.
landed.
joke. Yeah. It
For
was-
sure.
That's good.
Delphi was neat though.
I will say, though, before we get into that, we got to do the 2 truths and a lie here.
Oh,
Do we have that? Or we need some time?
Do I need to, let me just ask some clarification. Just around Delphi, around the place,
Greece in
or just
general.
our day in general?
That'd be good enough.
let's do day.
Just our day in general.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, let's do it towards the end. Give me some time, and
Okay.
I'm almost there.
You
But
tune out. You want to give your headset to Levi because you'll probably be thinking for a while.
I can.
You
yeah,
can think
I
while
mean,
you talk. Though.
Am I being demoted from this podcast?
The eagle has landed.
So what were your
The
thoughts?
Eagles have landed.
the
It's
Eagles.
grammatic. Sorry. Go ahead.
Both.
Go ahead. I don't want to
Toto.
interrupt.
No, yeah, that's the last thing you should be worried about on this podcast. Thoughts from today in Delphi?
Yeah, so I had a few thoughts, but the first one is the Python. There's a
God.
little what?
The god of Python.
Yeah, I got a whatever.
God. Yeah.
And they, it's actually in Istanbul now, but the pillar, was there.
The
And
glass pillar.
yeah. So the thing that I thought was really interesting about that is the spirit that Paul cast out of the slave girl, Philippian slave girl.
Acts chapter 16, where we were a couple of days ago.
Right. And so I just think that's interesting because a lot of Greek mythology, a lot of people don't give too much thought to it, but obviously Paul cast out a demon, right? And they all attributed that to Python, which was relevant in their culture. So whether it was whether that's true or not or whatever, Paul cast out a demon that was
the thing that's interesting there, though, to me is she obviously had some sort of power, some kind of spirit in her, a demonic one, which was powerful. It wasn't just possessing her, but was doing a part of what she was being enslaved to do till the future.
Yeah.
And that was celebrated or worshipped at where we were today.
Yeah.
Yeah, this divining spirit, which is.
And inside the museum, I was circling around some of the different rooms, and they had up where the theater was, they had big sections of the wall that they had taken off and put inside this room. And I was reading just a little bit, and one of them talked about how that was a huge part of their religious life, was battling demonic forces. So in and of itself, they worshiped the god of the Python, and yet what Paul would have cast out of that woman or that young girl was that. As I thought, what a weird contrast when you look at the two different religious systems. One thing that's demonic in one system is worshipped in the other, and that was not that there's any real significance there, but it just was real striking to me.
And obviously, Satan is portrayed as a serpent, you know. So there's
I thought it was
a lot of
contrast.
parallels. Oddly,
it's interesting how you stand, and you wouldn't pick up on this unless you watched Wayne Styles, or you were there. You have the wall of emancipation that is right below Apollo's temple.
You should explain what that is, because that's a huge imagery.
There are the names of 800 slaves, according to Wayne, that are on that wall. And there was two ways that you could receive freedom if you were a slave. Someone could purchase your freedom, or you could be emancipated for your freedom. You have that going on, which indicates that there was physical slavery, right?
And then people who had been set free.
Correct.
Worth noting.
Yeah, for sure. So those 800 names are slaves that have been set free. But I was standing there thinking about physical slavery, and then you look up on the hill and you see the Python, and you see spiritual slavery. Both of them on display right there in front of our eyes.
I had the same thought from the opposite perspective. I was looking through the statue of Python at the Wall of Emancipation, and I reflected back on the video thought I had at Philippi from Acts 16. Because we're talking in those three stories, three people that we highlighted from Philippi. The slave girl, the jailer, and Lydia, all of them found freedom spiritually in Jesus. And so you've got that freedom of emancipation going on in the background. We've got this spirit here that we just read about, being set free from, which is a much greater freedom than just being set free as a physical slave, although that's a big deal.
And the another connection that I heard and read today was Socrates taught whenever he was teaching. It was at fourth century, somewhere in there. They believed, and there's a lot of writings by him, that they believed Greek religious teaching taught that you were either doomed for positive afterlife or negative. You didn't get a choice. It did, and in the more I read, they didn't get a chance to even earn it. That Zeus was the great determiner of eternity, and even to that point. So you think about the Wall of Emancipation versus all the other places, and it's just it would have been a very difficult thought process to think that when I die, I'm either going to go to a good place or a bad place, and I don't get a choice. doesn't matter how I live, it doesn't matter what I do, and Zeus has determined it. So
Matt and I were talking as we were standing there. So you've been set free, like from physical slavery. What do you do with that? You know, like,
yeah, where do you go?
What choices now do you make?
Yeah,
even in light of, not having a good or bad. But I think about what Paul and those guys bring to them. So they're set free, right? And not necessarily Paul and companions at Delphi, but here in Greece, Macedonia, Paul is saying, hey, like, you guys have been slaves because that's all over this region and area. But let me tell you how, like, to combat this idea of you have no options. Like, Jesus has actually set you up to be able to go to heaven with him all eternity. Like, conquers Zeus.
I think the reality of all the places that we've gone to, even over the past 3 years, we've gone to Israel, then we've gone to Turkey, and now here in Greece, we've seen all of these different temples to different gods and different deities. And we talk quite a bit about spiritual warfare. And I think what often gets lost on these places, because you get caught up in just the grandeur of the history around them. They're cool looking buildings. You think about just how old they are and how a lot of pieces have withstood the test of time. But what gets lost in that is that is a huge part of spiritual warfare, because the reality of spiritual warfare and Satan, our enemy, is that he's not just necessarily wanting you to worship him. He just doesn't want you to worship Christ. So anything other than Christ is okay by him. And you look at all of these places, and it was demonic. That often gets reserved for this severe, we think of, because of Hollywood, it's kind of made it something that it's not always. But something demonic is just something that is rebelling or the opposite of Christ. And you look at all of these shrines and these temples, and you realize, wow, this is a spiritual battleground.
I tell you what just kept coming into my mind is Ecclesiastes 3:11, that God has placed eternity in the heart of man. It's like, because they're longing and looking for something, they just don't know what it is.
Yep.
That's what I come with at Romans chapter 1.
Yeah.
Paul writes, beginning in verse 19, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse.
Yeah.
I struggle with, so I grew up in church, I know Jesus. I've got an understanding of God's plan because I've got a familiarity with the word from my life experience. They didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't, right? And so is a lot of what they do because of that longing that God placed in us, because of that revelation that's in the world around us? They don't seek it, in a way, obviously the way we would, through Christ, but they don't seek it in a way that ultimately points them to God. I don't know. It's just, that's a real struggle I have.
Well, and I mean, that just calls us to an urgency to proclaim the gospel.
That's right.
Like, eternity matters for the people's lives around us.
And the path that they take to express and to, to live out that which they see, and that's the God revelation around them, matters. When Jesus says, I am the only way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father but by me, that's what he means. He's it. And so you can't get through Zeus and Apollo or whatever. So
one of the other things that kind of came to, someone is going to be in the podcast. One of the things that Andrew and I were talking about when we were walking up was the fact that here we are, thousands of years after this city has been demolished. She's going to be in here soon.
Should we pause?
Nah, just keep going. This is really important. But we were sitting there thinking about how here we are thousands of years later walking around the ruins of this ancient city. And I thought about how, and you and I talked about this, how physical kingdoms always fall.
Yeah.
Like, dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, the Greeks never thought when they were building all these things that one day there'd be a bunch of tourists walking around, paying museum fees to see their great temples.
Flying nonstop from Chicago to see it.
Yeah, and doing historical biblical studies in these places, right? That would have never crossed their mind. They were thinking they are at the pinnacle of civilization, of technology, of wealth, and power. Then what happens? The Romans come in. What did they think? The exact same thing. They, no one could touch them. Kingdom, empire falls. And I think about that because, especially as Americans, we often believe that we have security in our identity as being an American and living in the United States. When in reality, our only security is living in the kingdom of God. Jesus in a relationship with him is the only security we're guaranteed. We're not guaranteed a kingdom of prosperity just because we live in a certain location.
Ben and I were talking about that as we walked the sidewalk there at the museum. The politicalization of evangelical Christianity is killing us. Right? We're all focused on not we all are, but in general we are focused on an American solution from a political candidate who is not our pastor, but we make him to be like that. The president is not intended to be our spiritual leader. And we want somebody that lines up with our political, moral, whatever. It's just becoming a mess because we think that's our answer, and it's not.
Yeah. This goes back to a message, Jeff, you preached several years ago, but it stuck out to me about your primary source of identity, because it's not, you were talking about, for many of us, we think we are American Christians, but that's not the case. Christ's first. And that's your primary source of identity, because that's your primary source for eternity. And we gotta make sure we keep that as the focus.
All other kingdoms crash and fall.
Yep.
Yeah. Any other thoughts from today that kind of stuck out to anybody?
Well, I really liked going. I was hustling it, thinking I was going to be the first one to the stadium because these guys were behind me. And then I crest the hill. I mean, I'm using every bit of cheese pie that we had.
Yeah.
Every bit of cheese pie, energy, calories.
Yeah.
And 16 ounces of Americano to get up there first.
Yep.
And then I arrive and these amigos were standing there.
We were almost ready to head down.
They were done. They were done.
That's because they went with the
got
chocolate
there.
pastry.
It's because they didn't stop and make films on the way, I think. But anyway, the stadium was really cool. Just sitting there thinking of the contest, the athletic contest that took place there, a precursor, parallel to that was the Pythian Games, the Olympic Games that we're gonna see more about. Not tomorrow, the day after, that kind of stuff in Athens. But I was just, and I'm going to read this. We'll probably read it again when we get to Athens. But from Corinthians, when Paul, 1 Corinthians chapter 9, Paul talks about running a race. And I was just thinking that passage through as let me get there. As I was looking at the stadium. Do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Because the little informational placard there was talking about the prize they receive. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like a man running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think I'm always just struck by Paul's use of his cultural surroundings. I mean, we know Paul is a smart dude, but he's persuasive in the way that he brings the gospel about. We talk about relational evangelism a lot, and not to say that you shouldn't preach the gospel to people that you don't know. It's not saying that, but just that what we found is that in relationship and being a part of a community, it seems like that opens up opportunities to share the gospel more. And I think Paul does that. He's living among these people, at least for a time, and gets to know their cultural surroundings, gets to know their temples. I mean, he's going to go to Athens and look around and go reason with the Jews in the synagogue and then go talk to the Gentiles outside. I mean, he just uses what's in front of him, but it's all centered around sharing the gospel.
One of the big things he does on this missionary journey is a person of peace. And so if you read Roland Allen's missionary methods, he talks about Paul's missionary, here specifically the second one. And he talks about this person of peace where Paul would go into a community and start up a conversation, just being natural, but he would look for people to have those spiritual conversations. And then Blackaby, Henry Blackaby, kind of explains what that looks like about any spiritual conversation is one that God is already prompting in the people's hearts. And this is that idea of person of peace.
Spiritual that conversation can't come from anywhere. The devil doesn't want you thinking about God.
That's exactly right.
It's got to be from God.
So when you hear those spiritual conversations, or they begin to happen out of a normal conversation, it's okay to proceed with the gospel. And Paul uses that over and over again because he doesn't spend a whole lot of time in these places overall. Corinth is one of the longest stays he has in the second journey, even in the third. And so he's very mindful of looking for where God's at work already in the people's hearts. These conversations about the idols and gods and all these things, they're looking for these spiritual answers. And Paul takes the opportunity because he knows and he trusts God that Jesus is going to do the work in them. And he just capitalizes on it. And we can learn that as well.
Mm-hmm. There's a sense of urgency.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was Henry Blackaby Experiencing God highly recommended.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is fantastic.
Yep.
Well, before we shut this podcast down, Ben.
Okay.
You get ready?
Let me ask for some clarification from you guys, just what your thought process is on this. Does this need to be biblical based on today, or just
at this point in the podcast,
just
nobody's
anything.
Listening, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's true. Okay. Actually, I think they held on right to the end.
I think that they stuck
this.
around.
So they knew
just
this was coming. Okay. So do we want it to be personal?
Sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right.
You do your thing, man.
So two truths
just let the Spirit lead you,
and then join in.
Okay. So just these will just be based on our time here in Greece, and so man, what a ride it's been. We're on day 5.
Almost like a leap.
It has been. So well said. So. Let me give you 2 truths and a lie. The first, well, these are all true. The first truth is we have actually been in a car accident here in Greece. Small, big, doesn't matter. Just the fact that there has been an accident that has occurred here in Greece. Andrew and I went bungee jumping today. Off the Corinth Canal. That's the other truth. And then
the Corinth Canal is like 180 feet deep. Anybody who knows anything about the Corinth Canal knows it's a long.
Well, I'm assuming that these
people
fine
are
folks,
they're very smart.
They know a long way.
Dude,
down.
Just Google it.
Yeah.
Stefan, when you're making this podcast, slap a picture on there.
Just to recap, we got in a car accident.
Yeah.
Bungee
jumping.
Yep.
Third, what is it?
The third one is we have actually swam in the Adriatic Sea.
The Adriatic Sea.
So, okay. So,
all right. Before we give any answers, make sure you let us know in the comments what you think. A, B, or C. Okay. And I don't know if we should give the people.
I don't think you guys should guess because you'll know all of these.
So we'll let them guess. You guess in the comments. Stefan will tell you the truth later when he receives all the comments. We're just hoping that there's a comment, really.
Yeah, somebody comments, so this is worth it. Otherwise, I've wasted the last 10 minutes of thinking.
True. You said nothing in the podcast.
You pretty much used all your brain power for this.
That is it. We need to do this differently next time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on the smooth jazz edition of the ReThink podcast. And we're going to go eat some dinner, but we'll catch you next time.